Hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Winter Snow Mold is Coming, brought to you by Golfdom Magazine and our sponsor, Amvac. I'm Joelle Harms from North Coast Media, Senior Digital Editor for Golfdom. And I'll be your event manager. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded. You're currently in a listen-only mode. A recording of this webinar will be posted to golfdom.com/webinars and will be emailed to you tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to acquaint you with the ways you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice the Submit button in the lower left-hand corner of your console. Just type in the text box at the bottom left, then click Submit to place your question in queue. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Our Twitter feed is also placed on the right side of your screen. You can use the hashtag GolfdomWebinar to submit any questions during today's webinar or to enter into discussions with any other attendees. You can learn more about our speakers by viewing their photo and bio in the upper left-hand corner. And if you're logged into your social media accounts, you can share the webinar's title, description, and URL with friends or colleagues on social media sites, and that's within the Share This widget. Finally, if you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, select Help to submit your issue, and Assistant Producer Bethany Chambers or I will personally assist you. Now I'd like to turn today's event over to our moderator, Golfdom's Editor-in-Chief, Seth Jones.
Thank you, Joelle. I want to welcome everyone. Thanks for taking the time to be here. And I also want to especially thank our sponsor for this event, Amvac. As you all know, Golfdom Magazine is free for our readers. This webinar is free for our viewers, and we couldn't do that without their support. So thanks to our friends at Amvac, including guys like Jeff Alvis and Ron Johnson and Chuck Silcox. I get the honor of introducing our esteemed panel today. You know, if we're going to do this webinar, we figure we might as well do it right. So we got you guys the Michael Jordan and the Scottie Pippen of snow mold. So something that I'm sure they can put that on their resume someday. They can quote me if they like. But we've got our first speaker will be Paul Koch, Ph.D. from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We've got to say this about Paul. He's written for Golfdom several times, and actually he's an award-winning writer. He won a TOCA award for Golfdom a few years ago, and that's the kind of things that we really want to happen in Golfdom Magazine. It was, of course, on snow mold control. Every August, it's my plan to get him back in the magazine so he can share with you guys his wisdom on what's going on and what's new in regards to snow mold control. Then our other speaker who will be going second is Chuck Silcox. Chuck is the product development manager for Amvac Environmental Products, and he has his Ph.D. from Rutgers University. And he's also been an author for Golfdom Magazine. Matter of fact, he did a 50-year retrospective on PCMB for the magazine. So we're very happy to have both of these gentlemen with us today. And so, like Joelle said, we'll have questions at the end. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to our first speaker, Dr. Koch. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks for the introduction, Seth. And that is the first time I've been called the Michael Jordan of anything. But I will certainly take it. So I appreciate Golfdom and Amvac coming together to put together this webinar. Always really happy to talk about snow mold. So. First, before we get started, I just want to send out a quick thanks to Dr. Joe Roberts from the University of Maryland. I'm actually at the University of Maryland right now, and Dr. Roberts has graciously opened his office for me to use during this webinar. So basically what I'm going to talk about here is just give a brief introduction into snow mold, go through a couple of my keys to effective snow mold control, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Chuck Silcox to talk about his portion during the second half. So I know snow mold severity will vary for different people depending on where you are in the country. Some people it's a very minor or ancillary disease, but for others it's a really important disease. And you know, I know golf facilities in Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Rocky Mountain West, New England that are going to spend $25,000, $30,000 just focusing on snow mold control. So obviously that's a really important amount of money, and you want to make sure that you do it right. The other thing that's unique and frightening about snow mold is that you only get one shot, for the most part, to do it right. If we have disease breakthrough with collar spot or with brown patch or with anthracnose, we go out and we put a fungicide down. Within a couple of weeks, we're all cleared up. Everybody's happy and good to go, usually. With snow mold, though, you get one shot. Usually at the end of fall, right before snowfall comes. If you don't do it right then, typically you're buried under snow cover for a period of several weeks or a couple of months, and there's really not a whole lot you can do. And so that's why snow mold control is really important to a lot of people in the country. So I would say that I would happily talk for hours and hours about snow mold, but really we only have I only have about 20 minutes here to get across my point. So we're going to focus it in on what my 3 keys to snow mold control are. And those are going to be to 1, know which snow mold you have. 2, pick a good product. And we've done some extensive testing of fungicides at the University of Wisconsin over the past several years. And then 3 is you want to make sure that you apply it at the right time. And this is something that traditionally we haven't focused on, but there's really a lot of questions and consternation over when that proper timing is. So we're going to go through each one of the major snow molds in a little more detail. There's some snow molds that we won't really cover because they're more minor snow mold diseases. Something like snow scald can occur in Minnesota and in the Great Plains, but not typically a real severe snow mold that we see often. So we'll focus on the 3 big ones. We've got titular blight, which is actually a combination of 2 relatively common snow molds, gray snow mold and speckled snow mold. Gray snow mold caused by the fungus Titula incarnata. Speckled snow mold caused by the fungus Titula issukariensis. Identifying the difference between these 2 is actually quite easy in the field in the spring after the snow melts. Both of these fungi will produce sclerotia, which are long-term survival structures for the fungus. Gray snow mold will produce a red sclerotia on the leaf blades. Speckled snow mold will produce a small black sclerotia, almost looks like somebody sprinkled pepper onto the plants. For the perspectives of the audience, it's important to know the difference between these 2 because there are certain cases where certain fungicides will work more effectively against one over the other, and more importantly, we've seen over the years that gray snow mold typically will prefer to attack the turfgrass foliage, where over time speckled snow mold will also infect the turfgrass crown. So if you have gray snow mold typical on your course, typically you can recover from that damage relatively quickly. Whereas with speckled snow mold, oftentimes, if it's a severe infection, the crown of the plant is dead. And of course, we know when the crown of the plant is dead, the entire plant is dead. So oftentimes, you'll be doing a full recovery of those plants. And then really the most common snow mold out there across temperate climates is microdocium patch or pink snow mold. So we call it pink snow mold. It doesn't really require snow cover to cause disease, whereas the 2 titular fungi do. Usually just need kind of cool, wet weather. So out in the Pacific Northwest, in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, the UK, this is really their most common turfgrass disease, and certainly we see plenty of it throughout the Midwest and the Northeast, and even down into areas of the Mid-Atlantic, the southeastern United States. We've gotten samples of pink snow mold from Texas in the past, so we can really see this all over the country. This disease is easily tracked. It produces a lot of spores, as you can see in the lower right corner. So it's really a disease that can easily be tracked. So if you have active pink snow mold, you certainly don't want to be going through taking mowers or taking carts or taking foot traffic through that area. It will spread to other areas. One thing I forgot to mention about the titular fungi, typically the DMI class of fungicides is going to be most effective for controlling titular fungi. With microdocium patch, a lot of times we'll look to iprodione or the QOY fungicides for more effective control of microdocium patch. Looking at some of the damage that these different diseases can cause, it can be immense. So, here we're looking at some pink snow mold that, of course, in Colorado, extensive damage. Now, this was a course that had sprayed a fungicide to control for the snow mold, and clearly this fungicide failed in this particular instance. And that's something we often see when we see significant snow mold breakthroughs. Here's a course in Madison, Wisconsin. A fungicide was sprayed. In this particular case, with Titula incarnata, it was a case of the nozzles that are being some clogged nozzles, and also the water pressure or the PSI being a little bit low, not providing good coverage, and we got significant snow mold breakthrough. Here we have particular Ishikariensis. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And here the pressure is so intense that this golf course will actually do one cleanup lap, one boom's width around the fairways and around the entire bent grass area of the golf course to provide control of snow mold in the rough. And anything that's brown here has not been sprayed with a fungicide. And you can see the pressure that some of these areas can experience. And so obviously we know when we get into areas that have significant snow mold pressure, fungicides are really critical for proper control. So we'll spend the next few minutes just talking about some of the products that we have tested over the years. Again, we have some of the most extensive snow mold fungicide testing programs in the country, and so we'll just take a few minutes to talk about some of the products that have performed well over the years in some of our work. This is a picture from our trial last year in central Wisconsin, in Wausau, Wisconsin. It was taken by a drone from a GCSAA webinar that they did. And what it really shows is you can see there are certainly tan blocks, and those are the heavy disease pressures. Those are, for the most part, plots that either were not sprayed with a fungicide or were sprayed with a very ineffective combination. But for the most part, you're seeing a lot of green in this picture. So what that really says to me, and one thing I want to relay to all of you, is that there are a lot of different products that work. You don't have to use one product. So one thing that we'll talk about is use some of the research that we've done, use some of the research that other universities have done, and really find a combination that works well for your site, that fits your budget and fits your needs. There's really a lot of options out there for snow mold control, and if you look at some of the research that's been done, there's really quite a bit of different products from the different companies that will be effective. So then I mentioned that we do some extensive snow mold testing. Every year we do research at two different sites in Wisconsin and one site in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So we have a site in Madison, Wisconsin, a site in central Wisconsin in Wausau, and then a site in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in Marquette, Michigan, right along the shores of Lake Superior. And we do this to test for different levels, varying levels of snow mold pressure. So typically down in Madison we have low to moderate disease pressure. We start to get really heavy pressures when we get up into Wausau, Wisconsin. They have long snow-covered winters up there. And then certainly when we get up into Marquette, Michigan, we have really, really high, intense snow mold pressure. So we can really test these products under varying levels of disease. So here, this is a slide. This is taken from the trial that we did at Wausau Country Club 2 winters ago, so during the winter of 2013 and 2014. And in this particular trial, we had about 120 or so treatments. Obviously, we're not going to spend the time and march through each one of these treatments individually. So I just wanted to point out here a couple of the treatments that performed exceptionally well, a couple that did not perform well, and maybe why they didn't perform well. One other thing to note is that all of the results from all of our product testing trials, both snow mold, all summer diseases over the past several years, those can all be found at our website, which is there in the upper right corner of the slide. So 2 winters ago in Wausau, we saw predominantly pink snow mold, and we had really high pressure. You see the non-treated bar on the far left is about 90% disease. That's a lot of pressure. And then we go through some of these treatments that I've selected, and there are a lot that work pretty well. Interface and Mirage works very well. Interface and Triton, which has traditionally been the treatment combination that Bayer has been marketing, has performed well for several years. I just heard not long ago that they are no longer marketing Interface and Triton. We'll now be marketing more Interface plus Mirage. Both are good combinations. PCNB on its own did not perform terribly well, but we see if we look at the far right bar, it performs extremely well when combined with Concert. And that's a common theme throughout all of our work. When we get into really high disease pressures, we need a combination of multiple active ingredients to really perform well under and provide the acceptable conditions that we need in the spring. So then just looking at some of the pictures from this particular site, again, there's the non-treated control on the left. If you had a 14 acres or 18 acres of fairways that look like that, you'd probably be looking for a new job. So under these heavy pressure, snow mold control is really important. Then we have Trinity there on the right. a single active ingredient is just not going to do well in controlling disease under these heavy pressures. However, if we start to mix in multiple active ingredients, we start to do better. So Trilogy is actually a combination of Interface and Triton Flow that is only marketed in Canada, but it's a combination of 3 active ingredients performing extremely well. And we have a combination of Interface and Mirage, a little bit of breakthrough, but for the most part, again, performing extremely well. So it seems like once we get these combinations of active ingredients, it really starts to perform much better. Corkin 2636, that's a combination of tebuconazole, iprodiol, and thiophanate methyl. Again, performing really well, has performed well for years in a lot of our trials. Also in Strata, a combination of Daconil, Bandermax, and Medallion. Again, a really strong product that has performed well in our trials for a number of years. And then here's kind of a side-to-side comparison. Under those heavy pressures that we see in northern Wisconsin, Turfside on its own, not performing up to most people's standards, but still providing a significant knockdown. If we mix Turfside in with Concert, we've seen really excellent control over a wide variety of circumstances. So we were lucky enough then to have a couple of treatments that we could really illustrate the impact that multiple active ingredients have. So for this picture here, we have Interface plus Triton Flow on the far left, at a little bit of a half rate. So that's why you see some of the disease breakthrough there. If we just take out that Triton Flow, we see a complete breakdown in the amount of disease control that we see. And then if we just take out that Interface and just leave the Triton Flow, we see a complete loss of disease control. So really, we've noticed that you need to get to 3, or in some cases more active ingredients to really have effective disease control under heavy pressures. Another great example right here, Torque plus 2636, performing spectacularly well there on the far left. If we just take out the 2636, so we're left with just the DMI, we see a significant loss in the amount of disease control. If we just take out the Torque and have the 2636, again, we have that significant loss of control. So we put all those 3 together, we go from literally almost no control to almost spectacular control. So, it's a little unclear about what exactly is going on there, but it appears to have more of an impact on the pathogen itself. Some sort of, I don't want to use the term synergistic until we do some more investigation into it, but it does appear to be an increased impact on the pathogen and not an alteration in how each of those fungicides degrade in the environment over time. And that we found that out from some separate research that, that we could talk about another time. We also have trials, like I said before, up in Marquette, Michigan. And what I really want to do here is point out one aspect in particular. So as you can see from this picture, the pressure is intense up in this area of the country, but we can get excellent control from certain products. But it's not always consistent from year to year. So here I picked out the combination of Interface and Triton and then Instrata. And I'm not picking on these 2 just to, pick fun at Bayer and Syngenta, but what I want to show here is that even when you use a good product, in some years they don't work, or they don't work up to the level that you need them to work. So here we have in 2014 immense pressure. We're seeing predominantly speckled snow mold at this site, but the pressure on the non-treated are nearly complete, nearly completely disease covered. In Interface and Triton Flow performed extremely well in 2014. And in Strata, really one of those kind of gold standard snowmobile treatments that we have out there, performed really poorly. So we didn't really have a good answer for the people that use Strata why that didn't perform well there. Now we go to the next year. This last one, 2015, same site, same golf course. And Strata performed really well, and Interface and Triton, same product combination, didn't perform quite as well. So there's, the winter environment is such a crazy environment, a lot of extreme weather conditions, and certain years, even quality products will fail. So, one recommendation I have is if you're looking over some of these results that we have, to really look over multiple years and look at those products, those treatments that are performing well over a series of years to really get a good handle on what's going to work at your facility. All right. So if the most common question that I get with regards to snow mold is what product should I use? The second most common question that I get is when should I put it out? There's really kind of 2 lines of thinking here. One is the early birds. They want to get it out well in advance of expected snow cover. And the thinking there is to get the product, any penetrant or systemic type products, onto the plant while the plant is growing so the plant can take those products up. Then we have on the other side the just-in-timers. These are the ones that, if they would apply it as the snow begins to fall, they would be happy. And the thinking there is that there would be little time for the environment to really impact the degradation of those fungicides. So, at this point in time, I'm not going to say one camp is right and one camp is wrong. We still need to do more research on when the optimal timing is, and we actually have a research project going on that we started this year that's funded by the Gulf Coast Superintendent Association of America as well as the Wisconsin Gulf Coast Superintendent Association, trying to pinpoint when the optimal snow mold timing is. But at this point in time, my thinking is try to plan to apply the snow mold within about 2 weeks of the final mowing. But also be flexible enough that if we are having certain conditions that might lead to the breakdown of those products, you can adjust when you apply them. So if we have a 1-inch rainfall forecasted for the day after we're going to apply our snow mold fungicides, hold off and apply it at a later point in time so you don't have that large level of degradation. So plan for right around 2 weeks prior to, or 2 weeks within the final mowing, but be flexible so that you can make adjustments if need be. And, as I always tell our superintendents in the Midwest, it's better to be 2 weeks too early than it is 1 day too late. And so we have this picture here, and what happened to this particular sod production facility is that they put out one tank on the 14th of PCB. Again, it performed extremely well. For whatever reason, they didn't get the rest of that nursery sprayed, and then there was a snowfall event the next day, and they wanted to get something down, so they went out and sprayed PCB on top of the snow, which is a couple inches of snow, and clearly PCB and most fungicides are not effective when you spray on top of the snow. And this picture here was provided by Dennis Robinson from Horse Distributing, and it's a great example of what you need to do, which is get the snow mold products out before it snows. So that's something that might be really obvious, but one thing when we try to really press and get it out as late as possible, sometimes we get burned, and we can have unfortunate situations. So with that, I'm going to end my portion for now. Here's my contact information. At any point in time, please feel free to go ahead and contact me with any questions you might have related to snow mold or timing, whatever it may be. And I'll just end with one final note, that no matter how good your product is, and no matter how perfect your timing may be, you can't account for the fact that you or your spray tech is too lazy to get off the sprayer and take out the pin, and which is what happened here. We saw the sprayer didn't feel like getting off the tank, went around the pin, skipped the little area, and then we have a little bit of snow mold there. So that's just kind of one of those unique situations. You always can't account for everything. So we really try and account for most of the other aspects related to product selection and timing through some of our research. So with that, Seth, I'm going to go ahead and throw it back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Great presentation, and lovely photo there at the end. I hope that whoever was applying that day got to go out and see that. We do have questions for you, but we're going to hold them to the end. I've got some follow-up questions to some stuff you touched on already, but we will hold those to the end. Meanwhile, if anyone has any other questions, go ahead and zap them to us. I'll add them to my list, or if you want to tweet them at us, however you want to. But right now, we're going to go ahead and go over to our next speaker, Dr. Silcox. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Seth, and great job, Paul. And I'd also like to thank everybody for tuning in today. Great information by Paul. What I'm going to do is go through some recent research with PCMB for snow mold control. I joined Amvac 3.5 years ago, so I'm 3 winters into our snow mold program, and that was at a time we were kind of relaunching PCMB, so we're trying to kind of rediscover it. And what I'm going to go through today is at that time we sat down and we looked at some of the product attributes, so I'll review those. Then I'll go through a little bit of an evolution of the fall of 2012, 2013, 2014, some of the treatments we evaluated and how our thinking evolved. And then the real meat is, as an industry researcher, we kind of look to where we can get multiple years, multiple site studies, and pull together a cross-trial summary. So that's kind of the meat of my presentation, looking at snow mold efficacy, turf quality, as well as what I call consistency summary. I'm going to talk a little bit about a study, and Paul's doing a part of this, a rooting study and then a little bit of supplemental data. So in the fall of 2012, Ron Johnson and I sat down, okay, how are we going to look at turf side? And we came up with this list. One, it's an effective snow mold product. It stood the test of time, over 50 years of use. Secondly, economical. No other single active ingredient can match that cost effectiveness. 3 is versatile, used on tees, greens, fairways. You can use it alone, but I'll echo what Paul's saying. We really see the greatest consistency when it's used in tag mixtures. And back when PCMB went off the market, a lot of the researchers kind of looked at a number of treatments and kind of put them into a good, better, best category. And kind of the tagline we put together was that Turfside makes good products better and better products best. So whatever you want to use, you can make it better with Turfside. And then something not to be lost is the fact it's a unique mode of action. So resistance management is a key component. It's the only Group 14 fungicide. It's a contact, multi-site mode of action, so it's going to play a role in resistance management. And with all this put together, we feel that Turfside should be the foundation of a snow mold control program. So let's walk through a little bit of the results over the years, kind of some hand-picked trials. This was the fall of 2012, spring of 2013. This is one of Paul's sites in Michigan. And if you just go left to right across the slide, you'll see Turfside at 8 ounces, then Banner Max at 2 ounces, and then the combination of those two. So adding Turfside to Banner Max, boom, really bumped up control. Next is Acno Ultrix, and next you add Turfside to it. Then interface at 3 ounces, add Turfside to it. So it kind of falls right in line with our thinking of the product. This is a study the same year Bill Johnson out of Washington State conducted it. If you look across, you have the 3 rates, 8, 12, and 16. I'll just remind everyone, the label rate for Turfside is 12 to 16 ounces, but typically when it's used in tank mixes, we look at that 8-ounce rate. So there's, going left to right, Turfside at 8, 12, 16, and then there's Interface and Triton. The next bar is Interface plus Turfside. And then Concert and Banner Max, and then Concert plus Turfside. And this is where we first got a glimpse at that combination, which Paul mentioned earlier how well it did in one of his trials. That was our first glimpse at how effective that treatment was. So obviously we follow up in subsequent years. So let's look at a couple from the fall of 2013, rated in the spring of 2014. Again, this is another one by Bill out in Montana. Going left to right, 8, 12, 16, nice little dose response there. And again, Banner Max alone did much better, but when you put it with Turfside, nearly perfect control. Torque, it's the first time we looked at tebuconazole. Kind of middle-of-the-road performance, but when you mixed it with Turfside, greatly enhanced control. Now, this was Bruce Clark did this trial in my alma mater, Rutgers, and just going across again, 8, 12, 16 ounces, all excess of 90% control. But then you look at what happens when you substitute Turfside for another product, because that's Interface Triton did very well, but when you took out the Triton and put in the Turfside, it became perfect. There's that Concert and Banner Max again. Substitute Banner Max with Turfside, perfect control. And then Insignia plus Trinity, take out the Trinity, put in the Turfside, very, very high levels of control. So let's go through quickly last year, the most recent of these hand-picked results. Same general trends. I'm not going to go through all the details, but you can see the 3 rates of Turfside, and then what happens when you take an established program in the market and substitute Turfside for one of the components. Greatly enhanced control. This is Bruce Clark again at Rutgers. Bill Johnson at Montana, the same general trend. Taking out one of the companions, putting in Turfside, very high levels of control. And this is Paul's work up in Michigan. So again, all those treatments that were used in a mixture, as Paul recommends, the Turfside treatments just gave outstanding control. So that kind of brings us to the meat of what I wanted to present today. kind of a 2-year summary. So this is the fall of 2013, 2014 winter, and then again last year, 2014, 2015. And what it is, we've got a database now of 13 field trials in this analysis. And we only included trials that had a minimum of 25% snow mold in the untreated. So again, had to have some pressure there. Anything will work if you don't have snow mold. You'll see some of the numbers here in a minute. High levels of infection in the untreated plots. The other important point is every treatment shown was included in each trial. So there's no cherry picking the data. The good, the bad, the ugly, it's in there. So we talk about pressure. Untreated plots averaged 63.4% snow mold, so very high pressure. You can see the range, 27.6 to 95. Another key thing, Paul mentioned this, all of the 3 major snow mold pathogens are included in this subset of data. And then the trials were located across the snow mold belt, Michigan, Montana, Jersey, Pennsylvania, Utah, Washington, and Wisconsin. You might have to squint to see this slide. I'm doing the same thing, but it shows the researchers. It shows the locations of the trial. And then when you get to the color bars over at the right-hand side, the first color bar should look greenish. That shows the snow mold pressure in the untreated plots. So you look down at some of those pressures, and boy, you can see that Paul picks some great sites, 95, 80-some% control. Then the 3 that are in red are the pathogens that were involved and the percent. So you've got pink, gray, and speckled snow mold represented in the database, and everybody takes turf quality ratings, which is the last column in blue. So you look at the efficacy from these trials. Let's pull out those treatments that we've kind of carried through over the years, which going left to right is Insignia plus Trinity, 0.7 ounces of Insignia, 1 ounce of Trinity, 79.2% on average. Concert 2 at 8.5 ounces plus Banner Max at 1 ounce, 85.9% control. Interface at 3 ounces plus Triton at 0.75, 91.1% control. And then what we're calling the Amvac program, a combination of Concert 2 and Turfside, averaged 98.6% control, extremely high levels of control. Now, I know you won't be able to see all the numbers on this slide. It's just kind of verifying the previous one. The key point is if you look down there, all the researchers involved in these studies have confirmed that their data is accurately represented in this table, and this table was used to generate the previous slide. So there's no doubt the information is correct, and of course the reports are available upon request if anybody wants to see them. What does this mean visually? You get asked the question sometimes, well, what's the difference between 98.6 and 91.1% or what? We put together this slide, and I like to do it in animation, hard to do on a webinar. But if you look at the upper left box, it's all brown. There's 100 squares there. And if it's brown, it indicates it's infected with the snow mold. So that's 100% infection. And then as you work from left to right, you can see what those various treatments would look like under that type of pressure. As you saw the pictures that Paul showed, sometimes you're confronted with that pressure. And you get all the way to the right, and that Amvac treatment of Concert 2 and Turfside, very visually impressive. And the lower series is just if there's 50% pressure, what they look like, and you can see still a big difference visually in the performance of these products. Turf quality, everybody's interested in turf quality when the snow melts. Here's how the turf quality data shook out. And I've got to point out that the Concert plus Turfside treatment was used in combination with the pigment product Foursome, so that'll certainly help its turf quality, but the fact that you got such great and consistent snow mold control is what gives you these numbers. And again, all of that data has been vetted by the researchers who conducted the trial, and all of that information would be available if anybody's interested. that kind of leads us to a consistency summary as I thought about this. And we set the parameters. We said, okay, let's say their success rate is 94% control. How do these treatments stack up in terms of reaching that number? Lo and behold, in those 13 trials over 2 years, every single trial, Amvac treatment of Concert 2 and Turfside gave at least 94% control. So very, very impressive, very consistent. It kind of relates to that slide that Paul showed earlier. We don't see a lot of swings year to year, and we're going to continue to do this. We're going to continue to evaluate that treatment. As Paul knows, you know, we've got it and some others in additional trials that he probably is putting out. If he hasn't got them on the ground already, they're going out very soon. But we'll keep building this database. Very impressive level of control. Root pruning. A lot of people talk about root pruning with PCMB. Frankly, we don't understand it, so we thought we're going to try to understand it. And we set up a study of 3 researchers. Paul's one of them, UMass, Dunwah Young up at UMass, and then Steve McDonald in southeastern Pennsylvania. And what we did is we set up, this is the plot scheme, relatively long plot. And what we're trying to show here all the way on the left, the first year the entire plot got treated. The second year we just treated 1/2 of the plot. And then this year, treatments are either on the ground or going on very soon. We're just going to treat the middle. So by the time our final ratings are taken next spring, you know, we'll have a lot of comparisons there. We'll have areas that was just treated in the first year, in years 1 and 2, in years 1 and 3, and in all 3 years. So we'll have a very extensive database, hopefully, to put this issue to rest. We do have some preliminary results. This is a summary from the first year rating and visual quality root ratings, rating the roots on quality. And follow with me here. I apologize to anybody who's red colorblind, but there's a red line going across there at about 5.15, and that line can be compared to the yellow bars. And those first ratings were taken typically after the second mowing in the spring. Okay, so we let the turf get active, get mowed a couple times, pulled the turf roots and rated them. And then 3 to 4 weeks later, we did the second rating, which is the blue line going across at 5.53, and you compare the blue line to the pink bar. So essentially showing no evidence of root pruning. Paul does great work, as we all know, out there in Wisconsin. He also gets you your reports very quickly. This is part of his report from his second year of study, and you can just read his results and discussions. For the second consecutive year, PCMB was found to have no negative impact on the appearance and health of turf via the various metrics employed. So we're well on our way to documenting this. Like I said, the proof in the pudding will be the third year's very extensive study, and we'll have those results next spring. But so far, everything's looking great. Then I'm just going to close with some supplemental, what I call supplemental efficacy data. We get asked questions. You know, you show these various treatments, and as Paul can attest, I think one year I have 37 or 38 treatments in this trial. So I get asked, well, how about tebuconazole if you mix it with tebuconazole? Well, lo and behold, we had that treatment in all 13 studies, and the second bar from the left was Turfside plus tebuconazole, and very, very high performance, 93.7% control head-to-head. Very cost-effective treatment. I get asked about Insignia. Someone said, I like to use BASF products. How about Insignia? So we would dig into the database and pull out Turfside plus Insignia. Again, high control, averaging 94.9% control. Paul mentioned iprodione, kind of a standard for snow mold control. So we had just 4 field trials last year. And again, the second bar from the left is Chipco 26GT plus Turfside, over 90% control. So again, very effective treatment. And the last one, Paul called it the gold standard in Strata, Certainly a great product. We don't have as much data on Estrada, but I was able to go into our database and pull out 5 trials where we had head-to-head comparisons of turf side at 8 ounces and concert at 8.5 ounces versus Estrada at 7 ounces. High pressure. You can see what the average is, and well in the 80s for average in the untreated. So extremely high pressure, but boy, the turf side concert didn't flinch. And then I pulled out 3 trials. I think these were all Paul's trials, where they had both Estrada at 7 and 9.3 ounces versus turf side and concert. And again, just documenting that consistency and the high level of performance you get from that mixture. And I think that's all that I wanted to cover today. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank to Seth for moderating, and Paul, great job. Thank you. Back to Seth.
All right. Thanks very much, Chuck. A lot of good information there. I'm going to ask both Chuck and Paul to, if you guys are on mute, go ahead and get me off mute because we need to talk. We got a couple questions that came in, some good ones here, and I'm just going to go ahead and start. Chuck, while you're here, question came in that if you get Turfside 400, is that going to protect from crown hydration injury during the winter thaw cycle?
It's one of the advantages, I think, of using a tank mixture, especially as it relates to turf side, is, we're down at that 8-ounce rate. And I remember it was a UMass field day a couple of years ago, and there was a great progression from 16 to 12, or a digression from 16 to 12 to 0% with the 8-ounce. So it's one of the things that using it at a mixture, using it at the 8-ounce rate, it also helps minimize the potential for that type of injury. And then certainly if you're a person who likes the pigment, that helps as well. But that's one of the things we've been doing in a lot of fronts with PCMB over the past 3 years is really gravitate to lower rates, some products that are used in unconventional times for anthracnose control. Again, you go with a low rate and you put it in the parameters where it can perform without negative side effects, then you can take advantage of that novel mode of action and use it as a resistance management tool.
Okay, great. And for maybe for both of you guys, is there a magic number in terms of soil temperature when the guys should be looking for it to apply? Is that something to take into consideration? Paul, do you have any opinion on that one?
So actually, that's one thing we're looking at right now in our study that's being funded is we're looking at several different environmental parameters to try and help us develop kind of a predictive model as far as what would be a more optimal snow mold spray timing. I will say though that we know that the sclerotia of both the tifulas, the Sicariensis and incarnata, start to germinate around a soil temperature in the low to mid 50s. So that doesn't mean you have active snow mold at that point in time, but the hyphae, the mycelium, are starting to grow out of the sclerotia when those soil temperatures are getting down into the mid 50s. So really, any time from there on out, if you spray a fungicide that has efficacy against snow mold, you're going to begin to knock down that snow mold inoculum. And so you should have an impact on, to some degree, on the level of snow mold you have later in the year. And we've done some work looking at, really early snow mold applications, 4 or 6 weeks earlier than you typically would. And we see knockdowns in the snow mold disease level. It's not an acceptable level, so that means that the fungus can grow back out of it. But if you put down those early applications, you can have an impact. It's kind of like, the early season dollar spot applications. You put it down early when the fungus is just starting to grow, and you can really knock it back. Same thing with the snow molds.
Okay, great. I also want to encourage at this time any listeners who have a specific question that a follow up on something, go ahead and post it in that box and shoot it to me, and I think I'll have time for all the questions. So I do have a few more guys. Paul, you mentioned in your presentation, it's timing. It's so important. Well, let's all talk about timing, and then when a rain event occurs as well. I got a question from someone up north wants to know that the thing that kind of are dialed in on their timing, but then right when snow's covered, then usually a rain event comes and washes it all away. They're wondering, do they need to go ahead and reapply, or is it still going to? Do you think their product is still going to be effective? Do you have any suggestions on how they should maybe deal with that situation? In this particular case, they think it's been happening for about 10 years in a row that they've put it out and then seen that, there's a rain come, and they're still trying to figure out the best way to handle it.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough situation to be in, and it depends on a lot of things. We know that from some other work that we did, that rainfall events, whether they happen right after you apply them or whether they happen in the middle of winter, rainfall events will decrease significantly the amount of snowmobile fungicide that you have left. So the amount that is washed off is going to depend on the product used. We know that chlorothalonil is a little more resistant to being kind of washed off and out of the leaf than other products. In our study, we looked at a comparison between chlorothalonil and iprodione. So iprodione washed out of the plant faster than chlorothalonil did, so it's going to depend on the product you use and how heavy the rainfall is. We know that if we have a kind of a light tenth of an inch type rain, it's going to decrease our concentration somewhat. If we have an inch of rain, it's going to decrease it a lot more. And so, if you put out a fungicide and then a week later you get a pretty significant rainfall event, if you're in an area of the country that gets quite a bit of snowmobile pressure, then I would go out and I would reapply with something, get some sort of protection back onto those plants. If it's later in the winter, if we're talking about February and March, and you get a big melt or you get a rainfall event, then I'm not as concerned because then we don't have as much time for the snowmobile fungi to redevelop on those now unprotected plants. So there's a lot that goes into it, but certainly if you have a rainfall event and it happens right after you apply your fungicide, I would go out and at least get something back down after that rainfall event.
Okay, great. Hey, Chuck, here's a question for you. Is there either one, PCNB or turfside, is there an advantage over granular versus flowable? Do you see any suggestions on when guys are looking to make a purchase?
No, either kind of proven themselves through time. The advantage of the liquid is you're at lower rates. Anytime I think you use a granular, you have to compensate with higher rates. So, this time of year, boy, my preference would be to spray and put it in combination so you can take advantage of all the good things Paul was talking about. The granular really has a play if you're in an area where you're concerned with pink snow mold. Like Paul said, you get a February melt, and conditions are conducive for pink snow mold, especially. The granular's nice because your sprayer's all been winterized and it's in the shed, but you can pull the spreader out and get some granular PCNB on to get you through the end of winter and into regrowth in the spring. So both effective. Most of our research has been with the liquid, the Turfside 400, again, because we're in line with what Paul's saying, mixtures, and then timing is critical, but mixtures is a key component, and it's just curious to see as we go forward with that combination. We're looking at the concert and Turfside. We've been confronted with 13 different sets of parameters after application, and it hasn't faltered yet. So, I think I've got another 7 or 8 or 9 trials out with that treatment this year. We'll see if it can stand the test of time.
Okay, great. I want to thank Ryan Tully for this next question. I'm going to let Paul and Chuck. I got kind of this question and a follow up, and either one of you can take it. I think I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. What's an ideal height of cut on greens going into the winter, or for that snow mold application? Do you have any food for thought on that one?
So the question is, what is? Okay, so Seth, the question was, what is the ideal height of cut going into the snow mold application? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Going into the winter, is there a height of cut that you think is, do you want anything that you, I don't know, when you're doing your research, if there's something that is a preferred height to go into the winter with?
No, I don't have a specific height of cut. One, I like, and this isn't for snow mold reasons, but I like that height of cut to be raised a little bit in the fall just to improve rooting depth and overall plant health. It's a really optimal time for the plant to be putting down some deeper roots. So I think, anything you can do to improve the plant health going into winter is going to help with a bunch of different aspects. One being the plant will be a little more resistant to snow mold. It's also going to be more resistant to, winter damage, different forms of winter injury. But, we don't want, and this is not a problem we would necessarily have on a golf course putting green, but you don't want the turf to be incredibly long where it's going to lay over and trap moisture and cause damage. But that's more usually a concern in lawns. So with a golf course setting, yeah, we would typically just kind of whatever your height is, just be consistent going into that. And from the research that we've conducted, we don't typically see an optimal height of cut. Usually we see lower amounts of snow mold on greens than we do fairways. Part of that could be just because the higher height of the fairway cut and trapping more moisture and temperatures in that canopy will usually increase snow pressure a bit. But we've seen several instances of golf course putting greens just being completely hammered. So it's not like putting greens don't get snow mold. It's just typically we see it more often on fairways.
Okay. Well, I got another greens question for you. So I know you said it's mostly fairways, but another question regarding greens is, do you prefer the greens to be going? Should a superintendent maybe give a fall fertilization application, or would you prefer the greens going into the winter kind of lean? Or do you care?
Well, it depends on the timing of that fertilizer. We don't want active growth going into snow cover. We know that that's going to dramatically increase the susceptibility of the plant to snow mold. And I'll give you an excellent example. A couple of years ago, in Midwest, we had a very warm stretch in November, and we actually saw dollar spot develop in mid-November, which is certainly rare for the upper Midwest. And so we had several superintendents who applied fertilizer to try and grow the plants out of the dollar spot damage prior to snow cover arriving. And then, like the next week after applying that fast-release fertilizer, we got 6 inches of snow. And when the snow melted a couple months later, there was just a tremendous amount of snow mold. But what we also noticed is that the turf had grown out of the dollar spot. So there was active growth under the snow cover with that level of fertility that was put down. And there was a lot of snow mold development, even though that particular superintendent had applied a very effective snow mold fungicide. So, no, we don't want active green lush turf going into snow cover. We want that to be as hardened off and as lean as we possibly can. Definitely.
Okay, great. Listeners, I've got about 2 more questions here in my queue, so and then I'll be wrapping it up unless someone's asked another one into the chat box. So my next question is again about, we're talking about, you probably just mentioned much to my 8-year-old and 4-year-old chagrin, there was no snow here in Kansas last year, and they're hoping for it this winter. But the forecast has been calling for really not much activity here in the Midwest. So on bent grass, not much snow. What are the best products if that's the case again?
So the question was, what products to use if there's not much snow?
Yeah.
So then, and that's kind of that's an excellent question because I show our slide from snow mold nirvana where there's snow all winter long, but most people in the country are not going to be dealing with levels that are that high. Disease pressure levels that are that high. So really, we can go down, in those cases, a lot of times we can go down to 1, max 2 active ingredients. And really, again, we still have a wide variety. Again, a lot of those DMIs are going to be effective for low to moderate pressures. So whether it's Banner or whether it's, whether it's propiconazole, whether it's tritonazole, whether it's tebuconazole. Tebuconazole has been a really popular one because it's pretty cost effective and it's effective as a snow mold fungicide. Again, PCNB certainly is going to be effective in those on its own as in those lower to moderate pressures. So any of those products are going to be fine for lower to moderate pressures. And one thing that we forget about, and I know as pathologists say this all the time, but I really like checkpoints. So a lot of times we'll say, oh, I used this product and it works great. Well, you could have sprayed water and it probably would have worked just as well. So again, just find a little spot on your fairways or a spot there, just put down a board, spray over it, and then you have an idea next spring if you really needed that level of protection. But really the DMIs really do perform pretty well against snow molds. If pink snow mold is more active in your area, I would go something with like an iprodion. And then again, PCNB is really effective single active for low to moderate pressures.
Okay, a similar question actually that I just now saw from a listener up in Minnesota. another warm winter predicted up there, wants to know if they can still rely on one application in early November to last until spring.
It's going to depend on the conditions. So one thing that one thing that's important is, especially like in areas of Minnesota and western Wisconsin and kind of the plains, if we don't get much snow, typically we still have stretches of very, very cold weather. And the fungi, the snow mold fungi themselves, will not grow if the soil is below freezing. Okay, so the fungi need conditions above freezing to grow, or right at freezing or slightly above to grow. And so that's where the snow becomes important, because it insulates. It's an excellent insulator, and it will maintain temperatures at the surface, the turf surface, right around freezing or slightly above, and over a prolonged period of time, that allows the fungi to grow. So if we have a year where we have not much snow, we're just not going to have a lot of snow mold development. So back to the original question, if it's a warm winter, then yeah, you get away with the one application. But again, it's tough to predict that in November. So again, it's a matter of kind of what your level of risk is, and it also depends on what the kind of how the snow went away during the middle of the year. So if you have a thaw, did that go away with very warm temperatures, a heavy rainfall event? That's all going to impact the amount of fungicide that is still persisting, and then will impact whether you need to reapply or not.
Okay, great. One last question, then we'll wrap this up, guys. So a listener wants to know, this is their words here. Greens applications are tricky because you need to do it early enough that the plant is still metabolizing, but some contact fungicides degrade in sunlight quickly. When applying a product with multiple modes of action, which is more important, systemic or contact?
I'll give my thoughts on that. No, Chuck, do you want to take that one?
No, go ahead, Paul. I think that's kind of what we're stressing here. If you look at a lot of the combinations we talked about, many of them have both a contact and a systemic, so it gives you the best of both worlds. And I think they can compensate for one another. But Paul, I'll defer to you, man.
Yeah. So we talk about that a lot, and that's kind of what I was talking about with the two camps. The people that like to go out early, they go out early with those penetrant products because they want the plant to still be growing and take up those products. Then we have the people that are the just-in-timers, the ones right before snow cover, and they're putting down the contact fungicides just to provide like a protectant at the very end. And so some people actually split their reps. They'll go out early with the penetrants, they'll go out late with the contacts. My opinion at this point in time, and we're looking at part of this research project through G6AA and the Wisconsin Golf Course Superintendents Association, is looking at the rate of propiconazole uptake at different temperatures. And my hypothesis at this point in time is that you don't necessarily need to go out very early with those penetrant products, because there is still going to be some passive absorption of the product into the leaf blade. So it's not, if the plant is not growing, it's not necessarily going to be taken up through the roots and moved upwards from the plant, but it will still be kind of absorbed where it lands a little bit and still provide protection. So again, I still like, until we get some more information, I still like that right around the last mowing. So hopefully it's not, it doesn't need to be as the snow is falling, but it also doesn't need to be really early with actually growing turf to get it in there. So again, I try and take a middle road, right when you do your final mowing, then you go out with that application, and a combination of penetrants and contacts is fine. And we've seen from our research and research from other universities around the country, those mixtures appear to normally hold up well under a variety of environmental conditions.
Okay, great. Well, that was my last question I had, guys. So I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Paul, and I want to thank Chuck for taking the time out of your guys' schedule to do this and share information with our listeners. I also want to thank the support staff hosting this back in Cleveland for North Coast Media and Golfdom Magazine. And, of course, we also want to thank our sponsor, Amvac. So to all our listeners, good luck this winter with your snow mold. And once again, Paul and Chuck, hats off to you guys. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth.
Now, absolutely. Now, if Joelle has anything to kick in for...
Sure, yeah. Thanks. I just want to let everyone know that a recording of this webinar will be posted on golfdom.com/webinars, and it will also be emailed to you tomorrow. So thanks for attending.
Okay, thank you.